Hello and welcome to Missional Living, a podcast about everyday people living missional lives. My name is Adriana Melendez, and this is Greg and Rhonda Cantrell.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
To start, I want to encourage you with a quote. This is from Tim Chester's book, Total Church. Ordinary people living ordinary life with gospel intentionality. And that's kind of the thing that I like to focus on, ordinary people living ordinary life, just living intentionally for the gospel. And I think that's something that you guys do, but also you've had some extraordinary stories. But I first want to say, who are you and what has God done in your life? So,
my name is Rhonda Cantrell. I was saved actually as a teenager, born and raised in church. But the church I went to was one of those old traditional churches that really didn't preach salvation.
Okay.
And at some point, my mom realized that we needed something different. She had a friend of hers that encouraged us to visit another church. We did. Was introduced to what salvation was. And I mean, I knew all the Bible stories, but I didn't know, like,
that you could
nobody had
have a
ever asked
relationship.
me, hey, are you saved? Do you have a relationship with Christ? I know what that meant.
Yeah.
So I learned quickly what that meant and turned my life over to Christ. I was raised in a church home as far as my parents made sure we went to church all the time. But I also was raised by an alcoholic father that struggled with that after doing a tour in Vietnam and having a really bad motorcycle accident coming home from that. And he gave his life to Christ after I did. Actually, he got saved.
Wow.
Not too long before I left home. So his life completely changed after that. So it's kind of an interesting story there. But anyway, so I knew all the right things. I don't think I wasn't one of those one of those ruffians, like people call a hell-raising child or whatever. But I was very disrespectful to my parents. I will say, I was very mouthy. And, God kind of taught me, hey, you can't be like that. You got to be a little more respectful. And, it took me a long time to learn that because, old habits die hard sometimes. But, so that's kind of, I just realized one day that, if I didn't get that straight in my life, that I knew I was going to hell. No matter how good a person you were, and no matter, even if you hadn't done all those just horrible things that you hear other people talk about, I knew that it didn't matter. Sin was sin. And, so God showed me that. And I was, actually my oldest brother and I got saved the same day, which is kind of cool. So
That's special. Wow. Greg?
Well, my name's Greg.
Yay.
And a little bit different story. I come from the other side of the tracks.
Okay.
I had really never been to church up until I started visiting the church where Rhonda and I met, little country fundamental Baptist church. And I was into things that I shouldn't have been. My brother and I spent a lot of time together. We went out and did things we probably ought not to have been doing. And his wife had started going to this church, and she had gotten saved. She'd come to know the Lord. And she was, Mike said, come to church with me. No, don't, I'm not going to church. So anyway, him and I went out one Saturday night, and next morning, Mike come to church with me, and he got feeling so bad, he decided he was going to go. So he got up and went to church, and lo and behold, the Lord saved him that morning. Well, he told me, him and I were working together at the time, and he told me that, hey, I got saved last night. I said, great, wonderful, good for you. So I watched him. We had a camping trip planned about 2 weeks later, and I watched him, and he said, see a little bit of a change, not a whole lot, but, we went on our camping trip. I got a case of beer like I normally did, and he got some soft drinks, and I said, well, okay, so he'll be drinking my beer for the weekends. Anyway, he didn't, of course. So, and I seen the change. I seen it was just something different about him. He wasn't white like he was before. So that we got back, and I decided I was going to go to church, and I was going to get saved. So I went to church, and that Sunday, the invitation was given, and I went forward and prayed to accept the Lord, but God doesn't work like that. I was in church. I was practicing. I was reading my Bible. I was praying. I was involved in ministry and lost as a goose.
Yeah.
And I went like that for quite a while. That was actually a church that Rhonda and I met in. And I was working out of town. This was like a few years later. I was working out of town, and I was running a job actually in Greenville, South Carolina, and I got sick. I mean, physically sick. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I mean, I was physically ill, and a feeling come upon me I wouldn't wish on anybody. Wow. Just like almost a terror. And for whatever reason, we was actually in a different church at that time. I called my pastor up, and I said, this is a man I'd been involved in ministry with. And I said, Mark, he said, what's going on? I said, well, I'm lost. And I said, I need to be saved. And he said, well, I can't help you. I said, what do you mean you can't help me? He said, well, you know what you need to do. So at a Baymont Hotel in Greenville, South Carolina, I knelt on that recliner and asked Lord into my life, and actually was saved at that point. It's been like I said, I come from this side of the tracks.
Yeah.
They said opposites attract, so that's kind of where, as far as getting saved, that's where it started. That's how it began.
Oh, that's so cool. When has God challenged you to live missionally?
Well, I guess I'll start, but Greg actually started going on mission trips long before I did, and I was really not interested. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't those, and it wasn't that I didn't want to go anywhere. It was just like I didn't feel the need. And we had a guy at our church that was leading mission trips down in Guatemala, and this was like 2003, something like that. It's been a while now. It's been many years, but I don't know. I just felt the need that I needed to go, and so I went on 2 trips with them. I always tell people, I was like, you don't have to go to another country to be a missionary.
Yeah.
At all. The one thing I would encourage any Christian, anybody that's in the faith, you need to at least go on one trip to a third world country to see how other people live, because you have no idea. I don't care what you see on TV.
So true.
What you see when other people tell you about their trips, it's not the same as going in person and seeing it in action, seeing that these people literally live on the side of a mountain in a little tin building with a dirt floor and no door. I mean, and that's how these people lived. Yeah. So I think that's important. I don't feel like I need to be a full-time missionary. In fact, I told Greg coming over here that I've learned over the years that being a missionary is simple things. Like, there's been people that have come into my life, and we like a lot of people, messed up our finances early in our marriage and figured out the hard way, how to get that kind of, had to really work hard to get that stuff straightened out. And, there's a bit of shame in that. You feel like you don't want to talk about it because you don't want people to know how bad it got. But at the same time, I realize there are other people dealing with those same things. And if I can encourage them and help them in their financial journey to get a little bit more stable, then God uses those little things, And I always tell people, it's little things. I had a friend just mention this on a social media post the other day. And it's so true that there's things that you might do, and sometimes it's simple things. Mm-hmm. You might go into somebody and you can tell they're just having a rough day. Maybe you go into the doctor's office and the receptionist, the computer's broken, so you can just tell she's just really down and you just smile and say, hey, it's no problem, just take your time. And that one little gesture of letting them know, hey, I understand it's not a big deal. I'm not in a hurry, because a lot of people are in a hurry and get mad when things aren't going the way they want to let them know that it's okay. Because sometimes you don't know how close that person is. They're on the edge, and you don't know how close they are to the edge.
Yeah.
And you could be that one smile or that one patient person that kind of pulls them back, say, hey, you know what, there's still good people in this world that don't get in a hurry and that aren't going to get mad at me because I can't go as fast as what they want me to. So, I think that there's a lot of people that are missionaries and don't even realize that they're being a missionary just in the way they live their lives and the little things they do to help others.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's that ordinary people living ordinary lives. I think we forget that God has given us a life to live and people around us, and sometimes we get caught up in this bigger missionary journey value that we have neighbors and family and friends and siblings and children and parents that need us just as much as someone in a foreign country. But I agree with you as well. Like, my life changed in a major way when I found other believers who had literally nothing but God. And I came back home. I didn't even need, I was sitting there and I was humbled big time. I was like, I have everything. I mean, I have actually everything, but I don't have God, and therefore I have nothing. And that was very impactful. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Greg, when has God challenged you to live missionally? We kind of talked about it a little bit, Guatemala.
Yeah, I actually, well, a lot of different ways. I was working at a humanitarian aid organization, and I worked with a gentleman he's a Korean national, and he had basically a ministry where he was supplying different things to different missionaries all over the world. And he came in one day, and it was right when the Iraq War was ending, and said that, hey, said, I'm going to Iraq, and said, I want you to go with me. And I said, Cook, I don't think I want to go to Iraq.
I know, right?
Yeah. And he said, Greg said, no, said, you come. He says, I pay for everything. It'd be okay. I said, okay. So anyway, 2 weeks after George W. Bush got on the aircraft carrier and said major operations over, I was sitting in Baghdad. First experience being overseas, it was amazing. And anyway, that being said, that was the introduction, but I went on a couple trips to Guatemala and tried to get Rhonda to go. And she had no desire to go whatsoever. It's like she was saying, you don't really, people go on missions trips and they come back and they're trying to explain to you, what they've seen, what they experienced, and there's just no way to explain what you experienced firsthand on a trip when Guatemala, for instance, rolling into a village and people are just ecstatic and have nothing, nothing. I mean, I went into villages where you look on the shelves, there wasn't food in the house, no windows in the house, and smiles on their faces and stuff, and just the love, that you see on them and stuff. But anyway, I tried to explain to Rhonda and everything, and she didn't want no part of it. And we were actually getting ready to go to bed one night, and she said, Greg said, I said, Chris was having another trip come up. I said, I think I want to go to Guatemala. I said, well, here's the checkbook. So anyway, so she ended up going, but it's eye-opening when you're able to go and you think that you're going, I'm going to go minister to these people. I've never come back felt like I ministered more than I was ministered to. Yeah. Here in this country, we're so blessed in so many things we take for granted, the food. I was listening to a missionary over there who was a missionary national, and he was talking about coming over here and just tearing up. He said about you have so much food, you have so much available to you.
Yes.
He says, my people don't have, and it just breaks your heart, when you hear stuff like that. But that was a beginning. I mean, I haven't gone anything recently, but Rhonda was saying there's just the people you come in contact with every day. There's, we have kind of made it to where that it's almost taboo to go share the gospel with people anymore.
Yeah,
we've kind of convinced ourselves that, we can't do that anymore. We can't go out and share the gospel, that everything has to be done indoors, in-house. And I think that's a shame.
I think what you're talking about is an interesting change in philosophy too. There was something happened, I don't know, but I think it happened in the U.S., maybe exclusively, where, not only were churches sometimes were like country clubs that like, you can't come in unless you have a special invitation. But then they also became in the 2000s like the come to my church. Everything was like, you just come to my church and you'll receive the gospel. Come to my church and someone will teach you. Come. And we as the people, as the body, as the church, lost the ability to share the gospel individually. It really became this like, if you should just come into this building. And so there's, you call it like the seeker sensitive movement. There was even times like nationally, it was like National Church Day or whatever, like go to a church, as if the solution was just to walk into a building and somehow, somewhere, the gospel was just going to be shared. Instead of people, I mean, your brother, without using words, he showed you what happened, his changed life. That was a personal relationship that made you interested in then visiting, and that's where the gospel received. But like even you said, walking in the building and praying a prayer doesn't do it. But God pursued you, and again, thankfully, there was a person you had a connection with who then led you to Christ. Like it keeps on going back. And so I don't know why it happened. Maybe that was just, a tactic of the enemy that got us sleepy. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it just seems like we have gotten so, the Lord put, go ye therefore into all the world and share, the gospel, that's not a suggestion.
No.
And
he says, all authority under heaven has been given unto me.
Exactly.
Go therefore. Like, if the authority of heaven has one command and it's go, whoo.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I feel sorry because, there's so many Christians that are living these defeated lives that they've got this power in them. They're not even using it. They're not, they're not even tapping into it. It's there.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting on the sidelines thinking, well, God can't use me. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, God can use everybody. And I don't care what background you come from. Mm-hmm. I don't care how bad your home life was growing up. I don't care how good your home life was growing up. God uses everybody where they are. I even use, like I was talking about, like, living missionally, like at home, I lost both my parents this past year. And, but God was able to use me over the last several years leading up to that to get all of their financial stuff in order and everything. And I've got 3 brothers and a sister, 2 in Virginia. I've got 1 in Idaho and 1 in Baltimore. And, all of them were just like, I don't know how you did all of that. Like, and they were so appreciative that they didn't have to really do anything. It really was a lot of seamless stuff. But it wasn't because I knew things. It's because over the years, I've listened to other people going through similar things and learned from them, like, we need to do pre-planning. So we did my pre-planning, little things like that. And it might not seem like much, but it took so much stress off of the family members during that whole time that it allowed us to be together and be able to enjoy those memories of our family and everything without all the stress of having to make decisions that need to be made then because they'd already been done. So little things like that. And I know it seems like a little thing, like people are like, well, how is that missional? But because it gave my brothers and my sister freedom to be able to enjoy being together, to visit and to be able to share with other family members what God had done in their lives instead of being bogged down in the details of having to work out a funeral arrangements or whatever, or what are we going to do with the house kind of thing. So
that's the daily living things. Yeah, absolutely.
I just don't think we realize, just in day-to-day lives, just the little things that happen to us or that we say to somebody. I got a text from somebody today in Ohio that shared the gospel with me.
Wow.
A stranger that was sending it to somebody else.
No way.
Wow. Really kind of, I sent Rhonda a note, they was sitting there telling me about Jesus and saying, I hope it reaches you well and everything. And I shot him a note back and I said, thank you so much. I said, I'm a believer, and I said, I'm going to be praying that God uses you to reach this person, the right person. But, just stuff like that made my day.
Yes.
So, you just, the smallest thing that you can say to somebody, even like Rhonda was saying, a smile or anything, you don't know how that's going to impact somebody. Now, you know, we'll never know this side of heaven, but you know, in missional living, I wish I could say that I'm good at it, but I'm not. You know, and I mean, it's a probably more of a failure than it is a success at any given time. But that being said, it's we have so much that we've got that we can give to others without even realizing. You know, it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't, you know, of course you want to share the gospel, but sometimes just a kind word, a smile will do more than you think it will.
Yeah. Now there is one story that I wanted to capture because when I first heard that y'all had been on mission trips and then Rhonda didn't want to go, but, you know, really heard from the Lord, yes, I want to go. Please tell me the continuation of that story.
Okay, so
that
funny
happened.
thing, yeah. So I went to Guatemala the first time, and everything went just like it had been planned or whatever. And I actually helped plan the flights.
Oh,
That was
nice.
part of my
Logistics.
help. I did the logistics and everything. And the guy that I was working with, we actually had two different trips going on. Our trip, and then the day we were leaving, or the day before we were leaving, we had another group coming in. And so I had planned all the flights and everything. Well, the flight landed, and we were waiting for him. We had like this compound that we stayed at that this guy owned.
Yeah.
It was gated and everything because it wasn't in. I think we were about 2 hours outside of Guatemala City. It was out in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of thugs and a lot of bad things going on. So they had it gated and protected, and everybody protected or whatever. Well, we kept waiting, and they didn't show up. We kept waiting, and they didn't show up. We were starting getting concerned because, in fact, one of the boys that was with our group, because he was like 14 or 15 years old, his dad was with the other group coming in. So he was getting really concerned because his dad hadn't gotten there. He didn't know what was going on. Well, finally, the bus driver shows up. He's beaten up. He's bloodied. We didn't know what had happened. Their bus had gotten hijacked just outside the gates.
Oh, no.
Like, they'd gotten all the way there. Bus was hijacked. They'd taken them off in the middle of the woods somewhere, tied them all, zip-tied their hands behind their backs, laid them out in the middle of the forest, or the wood, not the forest, but, you know, the woods. And he was able to get away. And thankfully, nobody got killed. Nobody was, seriously hurt. He was the only one really injured. But, they went through all their stuff, took their passports, stole a lot of stuff and everything. Thankfully, it worked out well. But, of course, we went through overnight not knowing where they were at or what was going on. We stayed up all night with these kids because we had a lot of young teenagers with us on this particular trip. So we stayed up with them because they were concerned and, like, shaking, like, understandably so, because it could have just as easily been us. And I'm just thankful that God, worked it all out. But yeah, it was kind of a crazy time for sure.
I love that. Just like you finally hear from the Lord and you agree, and then you have a run-in with like kidnapping and
I haven't been back since then. I don't know if that had anything to do with it really, but
Oh goodness, I just love that. I have a few stories of being held up in more like in a more military way. Nothing, again, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I'll sometimes share the stories and people will be like, and you keep going back or you keep leaving the country? I was like, I mean, God's kept me so far, and if he's going to send me somewhere, he knows what's going to happen.
He even had the American troops full of guns on them when he was in Iraq. So it was interesting.
Yeah, we when we were in Iraq, they had the Saddam's palaces over there, and they had the one, and you probably have seen it on TV, where they had the two arms going up with the swords and everything, where the Republican Guard were housed. Well, I was with a bunch of Koreans, and we were actually on the way to the crit, but we stopped, and Koreans like to take pictures. They're the most picture-taking people I ever been around, but they love to take pictures. So anyway, they started snapping pictures, so we had some type of vehicle pull in front of us, and then had a armored vehicle pull on the side of us, and M1A1 pull on the back side of us, and somebody fired some shots, said, "Hands up." I said, "Yes, sir."
Oh.
Who are you and what are you doing
Oh,
here?
goodness.
Yeah, we're Americans, here on a humanitarian mission. And they said, well, where's your passports? Give them a passport. So anyway, long story short, we got to go with the troops over to one of the palaces and spent about 2 hours with them. Was able to share the gospel with them some, and just amazing bunch of people. It was unexpected, but it was a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, speaking of people who would need encouragement, I mean, to be a military over there could not have been easy. And for someone, I mean, the gospel is life. We know that. And whether someone accepts that or not, to receive it, or even to just be around it, to be around someone who loves Christ, we know that feeling is different.
Amen.
And I can't even imagine some military people who have seen things, have done things probably, and there's someone saying, hey, there is someone who loves you.
Amen.
And to have that spirit and bring that spirit to them, yeah. Like you said, we might not know to the other side of heaven, but like, ooh.
You have to use the opportunities that you're given, and but that was a kind of a scary but a great experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can be sometimes. These places God sends us can be a scary but great experience, even when speaking to someone here close by. Like, I work with a lot of high schoolers, and high schoolers can be mean sometimes. And they really can. I was in high school. Everyone was in high school. And when I see an opportunity to encourage or share the gospel, there's a little bit of that, like, oh, I don't want them to be mean to me, even as an adult. And so even those conversations can be scary. But on the other side, I've never shared the gospel and someone just have a huge, huge problem with me. Like, even in foreign countries, I mean, then you see those examples of maybe like witch doctors or people who I'm threatening their position will have a problem with me, but that's to be expected. But just a person that God gives in front of me, I'm more scared of it in my mind. And then when I do it, they might dismiss me. They might, I don't know. It's just something different.
I think it goes back to, we've talked, in fact, the pastor was talking about this past weekend, talking about spiritual warfare. And people forget that that's going on. But I'll tell you, Satan's greatest tactic is to put fear or doubt in your head that you're not good enough or you can't do this. So why would you share this story? You know what kind of life you've lived? He always is trying to bring your past up. But you know what? That past, if you're saved, that past is in the past. God doesn't care about that anymore. It's already covered by the blood.
Yeah.
You're saved. You don't have to worry about that. But my dad struggled with that too, because like I said, he was in Vietnam and he struggled with the things he had to do while he was over there. But he also knew that God was greater than that. And, he still fought those demons often in his life. He was quick to remember that, hey, you know what, that's old. I don't need to worry about that anymore. But I think some people get so bogged down in that they can't see a way out. And that's what I love is but Christ already gave you that way out. Yeah. Just let him lead you and let go with that stuff. And I think the problem is, and it took me years to realize this, that, I would go forward and I'd pray and I'd give things over to God, but then I'd pick them back up because I was kind of a control freak, kind of can still be. And I realized that, as long as I kept picking them back up, I wasn't really surrendering to him.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things we have to learn in our Christian walk too, that when you surrender something to God, you give it to him and you don't try to take it back and you don't try to take control of that again, because it's not in your control anyway. Yeah. But there's this perception that I have control of something. And as long as you have that perception that you're in control, then you're not letting him lead your life. So
yeah, that's good. Absolutely. Well, anything you'd like to add about missions or anything?
No, like I said, I just encourage anybody, if you've never gone, you need to go. You can go and I'll tell you, even the inner city, if you work with inner city, and just in the U.S. and see how people really live here, that can be a little scary too, to realize there are actually people that live like that you had no idea. Yeah. But I do encourage you, if you can get out, especially to a third world country somewhere where they really do live in true poverty and really understand what that really means, because we don't understand poverty here. Because even the poorest person in America has access to food, whether it's through a food bank or through the thing that our church does where they have the pantry that allows people to have food, or whether it's housing through the Salvation Army or the different organizations that offer provide housing to the homeless or whatever. They have an option if they need it. Other countries don't have. There's other places don't have a clue that they live literally in the dirt.
Yeah, well, it can be a little bit intimidating in this country. I think more so probably in this country. I think probably more so than it is at other places, because we are, in some ways, the United States has been blessed to cursing. We don't know what hard times are about.
It's true.
And other countries, especially if you go to mission trips, you typically you're not going to big cities. You're not going to very real highly populated areas.
the
You're
nice
going
areas
to
of
the
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 countries.
more needful areas.
Yeah.
And the intimidation and I'll say I've been guilty of it, is here you get intimidated to share the gospel with somebody because you don't want to get your head taken off or be rejected. It seems like that the devil has allowed us to be we've allowed ourselves to be intimidated by the devil for no good reason. But it's definitely, I agree with Rhonda. If you have never been overseas to see how the majority of the world lives, it would be well worth going if
Nice.
God gives you that opportunity.
Yeah. Anything we can be praying about for you guys?
How much time?
Yeah, just cover it all. Yeah.
We've got some family that we're praying about and wanting to Lord to intervene in their lives.
Yeah.
A lot of family that need the Lord, and that's first and foremost. Everything else, I guess, to that in my mind is secondary. But we've definitely got some family that needs the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I hope you found this conversation encouraging, and as you go, be in the Word to change the world. If you have just a testimony of what God has done in your life, if you have a time that you've lived missionally, email me at media@oldfortbaptist.org. I'd love to have you on the podcast. We'll just chat a little bit about what God is doing in your life and the lives of people that you love.